So now we're going to set up our HUD because it was great to see our power level in the material and movement speed, but it's a little hard to tell when the game was actually over. Also, we can print out a numerical readout of our power level to get a sort of more exact indicator. So we can actually create the HUD class right here from the file add code to project wizard 2. Let's see if it's actually here in the, oh, here it is. So HUD is one of the classes there in the sort of some of the basic parent classes you might want to use. So we'll pick that and call this our tutorial code HUD and create the class. So this is going to, again, reopen the new class or open the new class in the tutorial code project. And we'll go ahead and reload and stop debugging. So this is the tutorial code source and header files. And let's start here in the header file. You can see, again, we've got the HUD class included here at the top, and the generated header is the last thing included there. So we're going to start with, we need to set up basically a font and a override for the draw HUD function. So let's set up our font first. We'll call this HUD font. And basically, we're going to make this a U property, not because we need to set any specifiers on it, but because we want to make the engine aware of this variable, so it won't be garbage collected, and so it'll be checked for validity, and we won't destroy the font while we still need it for the HUD. And then, so this will be the variable for storing the font. And we will also override the draw HUD function. So we have overridden the tick function, which happens basically every frame. We've overridden the begin play function, which happens when gameplay starts. And draw HUD is a function particular to the HUD class, so we need to override that. And it's basically called every frame, and it's the primary draw call for the HUD. Draw call for the HUD. What that means is if you put any behavior inside either the draw HUD function or functions called by the draw HUD function, they will display to the HUD. If you have another function that's not in that same chain, it's not going to be called. So whenever you need a HUD, especially really consider that you've got the draw HUD function and that you can trace from when that's called all the way through any display functionality that you've coded or put in a blueprint or both. So that's it for our header file. Now we'll go to the source file and zoom in a little bit here. And we're going to set up our font first. So we're going to just use the Roboto distance field font from the engine. I'm using this because I know it's included in the engine. There's a couple other fonts there if you wanted to try one of those instead, but we're going to use constructor helper again, helpers. Font. And I'm just actually going to copy this path in directly. So this gives us, we'll create a temporary HUD font object, and this path I copied directly out of the engine. So engine fonts, and this particular one that I want to work with. And then after we've used that constructor helper, we set that our HUD font variable to the object that we've created here. And that's just, some good standard syntax to know if you're working with loading objects and then storing those into variables. So that's just when we construct the HUD. And the main functionality we're working on here is that draw HUD that I was talking about before. So we're going to be overriding the draw HUD function. And first we're going to get the screen dimensions and store those in vector 2D, which is just a vector that's too long. Screen dimensions. And I'm working with Canvas to make this HUD because I really just want a very simple thing that's going to print out my power level and print a game over message when I'm done. So Canvas comes with built-in functions to get the basically X and Y dimensions of your screen. So Canvas size Y. So I'm using the Canvas functionality to pull out the X and Y dimensions of the screen and store them in a screen dimensions vector. And then again, we're going to have a call to the parent versions of draw HUD. So this is, again, if the basic HUD functionality that's in that draw HUD function, we need to make sure it still gets called even though we're overriding the function. So we're going to be working with both the with the character's power level and the game mode. So up here at the top of the source file, let's go ahead and include tutorial code game mode.h and include tutorial code character.h. So now we can work with the game mode and the character. So let's get the character and always print its power level. Again, we're going to be, actually, we need to make sure to include gameplay statics too, because I'm using that get player pawn again. Include Kismet. And honestly, if there's something you're using this frequently, you probably want to move it to your module header file so that you just know that you always have it to use. And I'd probably do that if I were going to optimize this project going down the road. So we're going to use the get player pawn again. So our goal here, like I said, is to get the character and print its power level. So we're going to, again, cast the result of get player pawn to our particular tutorial code character so we can get its power level. And we're going to be using a little string formatting here because if we just printed the power level directly, because it's a float, we'd get a very long string of numbers after the decimal place. And I really only care about if it's 0.5 or 0.6. So let's do some formatting on that. We've got an F string, and we're going to call this power level string. And F string is a Unreal specific string class. And we also have brought over the printf functionality, so it's got some syntax you might be familiar with. So this is saying I want to print 10 decimal places before, or sorry, 10 numbers before the decimal place and 1 number after. Oh, need to put, quotes on this. And we'll take the absolute value of our power level. And this is just because when you get really close to 0, occasionally it dips just below before the HUD stops displaying. So I just put it in absolute value to be a little bit cleaner. And take my character's power level. And that's going to basically take in the power level, make sure it's positive, and then format it with the formatting that I specified there. And we just want to then draw this text, draw our power level string up in the basically top left corner of the screen. So power level string, we'll print it in a white font just because it'll be easier to see against the sort of dark sky. Print it up at X of 50, Y of 50, so top left corner, and we'll use our HUD font that we set up. And that basically it will always display our power level. And I said I also want this to have a game over message. So just like in the character where we checked the play state to see if it was, if the game was over or not, we're going to do that here in the HUD. So we're going to, again, get the game mode and cast it to our specific game mode so we can access the play state. And if the game is over, we don't want this code to get called if it's not. If my game mode, and again, we're calling the get current state function that's public. If that equals game over, then we need to start creating the text for printing game over. So one thing is I want this to be centered on the screen, and to do that I need to check the size so I can make sure to center it. So we're going to create a variable for storing the size of printing game over. And this again is just a 2D vector, because when you're doing work with a HUD, you only care about the X and Y coordinates. There's no Z depth, so you can work with 2D vectors. And call this game over size. And we can use a get text size function, which again is built into the HUD class, to see how basically the dimensions of printing game over, and store those to game over. Whoop, didn't go one parenthesis over enough. Game over size X, game over size Y. And one thing that's important to know, either in code or in blueprints when you're working with the HUD, is this get text size depends on the font, which makes sense. If you're giving it a really small font, get text size is going to return a fairly small value. And if you're using a gigantic font, then get text size is going to return a large value. So supplying the font to the function is a really important step. And now that we know the size, we can draw the text of game over. And this text macro is important to use. It just converts things for you. So we'll do this again in white. And I'm just going to do the math here in line. So take the screen dimensions and subtract half of the size. So this is going to center it. And we'll do the same thing in Y. So again, it'll be centered right in the middle of the screen. Oh good, it'll follow me here as I keep typing. And again, we need to give it the HUD font. So at this point, we need to set this HUD as our default HUD, so that we need to do in the game mode. If we go to the game mode source file, again, we need to include the tutorial code header, the tutorial code HUD header, tutorial code HUD.h. And in the constructor, we already are setting the default pawn class, and so right below that we can set the default HUD class, and that's as simple as taking HUD class equal to a tutorial code HUD static class. And that's just because the game mode, in addition to setting the rules of the game, sets things like the default pawn to use, the default HUD to use, and so we need to make sure to set that. Now at this point, we should be ready to test it out. So right-click again on your project and debug, start new instance. Go ahead and build, and hope that we got all the typos out of the way in the last video. And here we go, it's loading up in the editor. And so now we should not only be able to see our character's material changing and things like that, but we should be able to see the power level right there in the upper left-hand corner. And as I power down, you'll see, oh, battery landed on me. It should display game over, just like that. So now, not only can I tell it's the game is over because I can't move and batteries have stopped falling from the sky, but there's helpful text there to tell me, hey, pick up more batteries next time. So if you'll check back in the next video, I'll do a little bit of tweaking, some work with the hot reload function, and we should be ready to go. Thanks.